All right, so where are we? We've talked about why companies like yours need to plan. We've talked about what is the business plan, the roadmap, so to speak. We've talked about how to get started in business planning, the front end analysis, the SWOT analysis that I hope that you have completed by this time. Now I want to share with you what I think is maybe the most powerful question that any business owner, any business leader can ask of themselves and of their business in this planning process. But before I do that, I have to give you a short backstory. So, one of my favorite business books of all times is this one, Good to Great, written by best-selling author Jim Collins. Collins is a professor, University of Colorado, a management guru, has worked with many big Fortune 100 companies. He's also an author of several very good books. Of course, the best known is Good to Great. In writing the book Good to Great, he looked to answer the question, how do good companies like yours, solid companies, how do they become great? And why is it that some of those companies become great and many stay good or less? How do great companies become great companies? So first of all, he defined greatness. Greatness was a high level financial performance, 5 to 10 times greater than the industry average. And then secondly, he said that not only do they need to have spectacular financial performance, but they need to be able to do this over a long period of time, 10 years or more. So that was his definition of greatness. Studied about 1,400 companies, ended up with about a dozen that made this definition of greatness. Companies that you know, companies Wells Fargo Bank, Walgreens, Kimberly-Clark, Nucor Steel, the list goes on. And this study was done over 20 years ago, and many of these companies remain great today. Once he identified the great companies, he then asked a more important question, and that is, what do they have in common? What do they share, these great companies? And he found there are a number of factors each of these companies shared. One of which was he found that early on in each of these companies' movement, their journey towards greatness, they all asked almost the exact same question. And that question was, what is the brutal fact of our current reality? What is the brutal fact of our current reality? Translated, what is it that's preventing this company from becoming great? What's gotten in our way? What is our obstacle? What's the biggest challenge we face? What is the brutal fact of our current reality? And in the book, he identifies a number of examples from these great companies. One of which was Kimberly-Clark. Kimberly-Clark back in the 70s and 80s was primarily a paper company. They had these paper mills that they took trees and turned pulp into paper, primarily for business, reams of paper. And those were their clients, primarily business. And what they found is while they were successful at this, they weren't great. And they decided in order to become great, they had to stop producing paper, had to close down these paper mills, about 17 of them worldwide, and transition the business to a consumer products company, making diapers and Kleenex, consumer products, because they found that's what they were really good at. That's where they were most competitive. So their brutal fact was, we're not as nearly as successful as we could be as just a paper company. And by addressing that brutal fact, they then became a great company, competing and out-competing Scott Paper and Procter & Gamble. They became a great company. So think about your company as it exists today. What is the brutal fact of your company's current existence? What's the brutal fact of our current existence? So I've posed this question to lots of companies over time, gotten lots of different answers. What I suggest is to craft that brutal fact into a short sentence, 3 to 5 words, something that would be the headline of a Wall Street Journal article about your company. Maybe upon your demise, they ran out of cash, unable to retain key employees, poorly organized. What is the brutal fact of your current reality? So I'll share a story. I was doing an offsite planning meeting for an insurance company here in Atlanta a number of years ago. About a dozen participants, primarily the executives, the C-suite, so to speak, of the company. We're in a nice conference room in a hotel in Atlanta. We start off with a SWOT analysis like we talked about in our previous segment. After we finished the SWOT analysis, I then posed this question to the group. I gave them the story about Good to Great, and I said, what is the brutal fact of your current reality? The room got very quiet as each executive began to think about that question as it related to their business. What is the brutal fact of our current reality? And I asked them to write it down, scribe it. After a few moments, I then asked for examples. I asked the participants to share. No one raised their hand. No one dared raise their hand at that moment. Finally, a young man sitting in the back of the room, he was the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer for the company, raised his hand and said, I've got a brutal fact. This company has no leadership, he said. This company has no leadership. Wow, the leadership of the company was sitting right there at that table. And he said, we have no leadership today. Sitting next to him at the conference table was the president, the founder of the company. She looked at him, she looked at me, she stood and said the following. You're exactly right, she said. We have no real leadership in this company. I'm the president, I'm the founder. She said, I'm no leader. I can sell insurance. Been selling insurance my entire career. I love selling insurance, she said. I'm no leader, though. I am not the one to take this company to the next level. If we're going to be successful, if we're going to grow, she said, we need to find a better leader. Wow, the rest of the room just stood and almost stunned upon what they had heard. And then, as you might imagine, we began a great discussion about who will lead this company going forward. Will it be someone from the inside, someone from the outside? Will it be a hired gun, so to speak? What will their responsibilities be? What will the role of that leader be? And how might we find that person? We had a great discussion over several hours that never, ever would have surfaced that day had that question not been asked. What is the brutal fact of our current reality? So I suggest this is a question that you should pose not only yourself, but pose it to your peers, your coworkers, the management team of your company. What's the brutal fact of our current reality? Pose the question and then do what is very hard for many leaders. Say nothing. Just wait and see what comes out from your peers, from your colleagues. What is the brutal fact of our current reality? And like the companies in Good to Great, this may be the next step to greatness for your company.